To properly introduce my brother, he's a senior registrar in the Department of Psychiatry from Lautech Teaching Hospital. So this morning, he will be taking us, praise God. So this morning, he will be taking us through the topic for our Health Sunday, the scourge of mental and emotional ill health in our society, the Christian response. So I want us to listen to him with rapt attention. I want us to make note, to make our questions, so that at the end of it all, he can attend to some, to some area of confusion or areas that need clarification. The Lord bless us in Jesus' name.
Thank you very much, Ekman. Praise the Lord. Praise the living Jesus. So, firstly, I'd like to appreciate the leadership of this church for the privilege and honor that's been given to a small boy like me to have a talk with us about mental health this morning. And I also want to thank the organizers, the health unit of this church, Dr. Ajala. I can see Dr. Akinyemi there too. Thank you very much for this opportunity. So this morning we'll be talking about the scourge of mental and emotional health in our society, the Christian response. And I particularly think that it is a great thing that the Baptist Convention has done at this time to come up with such an idea to talk about how Christians should respond to issues concerning mental health at this time. And I believe this is being projected, okay? And this will be the outline that I'm going to follow as a guide, just to talk to us about the scourge of mental illness. So by introducing this topic, what is scourge? The topic is the scourge of emotional and mental illness. So it's important that at least we understand some key words in the topic. So what is scourge? According to the Advanced English Dictionary, scourge is just an English word, okay? There's nothing spiritual about it. So it means that something that causes misery or death, okay? Something that can cause extensive destruction or ruin. Other words that can be used in place of scourge include things like curse, nemesis, terror, threat. So essentially we can say that threat to our mental health, okay? How should we respond to threat in our mental health? And the mental health is also a key word in the topic. So it means that we need to also talk about what mental health is before we can even know about the ill health, the other side of the divide. Okay? So mental health in itself is defined as a state of well-being in every individual. And this is a definition by the World Health Organization in 2001, who stated that there are 4 components that an individual must fulfill before we can say that they are mentally stable, they are mentally okay. Okay? So individuals should be able to realize their potentials. So if I'm able to realize my potential, if I'm able to cope with the normal stress of life, and if I'm able to work productively and fruitfully in my community, and then I can make a contribution based on this to my community. So these 4 criteria should be fulfilled by any individual before we can say that an individual's mental health is top-notch, okay? And then, of course, when we have a deviation from any of this, when an individual does not fulfill any of these 4 criteria, we can say that individual has a mental illness. And as such, mental disorder is then defined or characterized by clinically significant disturbance in an individual's behavior, in their cognition, and their regulation. And that this behavior will then cause some distress to themselves or to significant others. Now, what this means is that, for instance, possibly you've known Dr. Ajala to be a very cool individual, a very gentle man, a father of twins. And then all of a sudden, you just realize that there are some changes in his behavior. All of a sudden. Then we can say that this is not the bro Ajala we used to know. What is going on? So when such happen, we can have an idea that, okay, perhaps something might be wrong with this person's mental health, and they might be need to do something. Okay? And of course, we should all know that being mentally ill is not limited to individuals that we see on the streets roaming about. It's also not limited to individuals who we see carry dangerous weapons to want to harm people. And it's not limited to people who kill themselves because they have suicidal thoughts. So it is beyond that. Like I said earlier, once there's a disturbance in an individual's behavior or their cognition, okay, that individual can be said to be suffering from a mental illness. Pardon me. Okay, so it's not limited to that person you see every day on the street picking rubbish on the street. So the rationale, the aim of this topic really is because globally the burden of mental health is growing, and this is applicable both to developed worlds and even the developing worlds, like Nigeria, for example. And the statistics are also not encouraging Nigeria. There are several studies that have shown that there's increase in various mental illnesses, in depression, in the use of hard drugs, anxiety disorders, and all that. And that picture is same for the world, and even worse for developing worlds like Nigeria. And the fact that there are socioeconomic challenges have also not been helping. Okay, so challenges like dysfunctional family, like crime, like violence. I know in Nigeria, there's, especially for those in the north, there's the issue of banditry, there's the issue of terrorism, the issue of kidnapping there, up and there, even in their pockets in the southwest. So things like these are things that would disturb the mind and that can cause individuals to develop mental illness. Okay, and then of course, recently in the past few years, the fact that most people, or I mean, a lot of youths now indulge in abuse of these hard drugs. I mean, you see them on Twitter and WhatsApp, on colos. All right. So those are things that are even making the scourge of mental illness worse. And the fact remains that both the family, the community, the church, even the pastors and the members are affected. There's nobody that is left out in this matter. In Nigeria, where we have above 200 million people, it's been shown that about 60 million of individuals suffer from one mental illness or the other. What this means is that if we gather 4 people, at least one of them has one form of mental illness or the other. And in Nigeria, the ones that are common are things like depression, where an individual is unduly sad. Okay? Okay, no, don't look at yourselves and say that if you, in this community of 4, maybe it's you. No. Don't worry. We have a supernatural advantage, amen? Yeah, so in Nigeria, the things that are common are things like depression, anxiety, when people get unduly fearful, alcohol abuse, and then somatization disorder. Don't worry about that. It's medical jargon. Okay? Now, this is not even made worse because in Nigeria as of today, there are only about 200 psychiatrists and 1,000 psychiatric nurses to serve a population of more than 200 million people. Now, what this means is that a psychiatric doctor, for example, a psychiatrist, for example, will be able to, in Nigeria, we cater for 1 million individuals. How is that possible? Now, the standard is that an individual should attend to at least 10,000 patients rather. So you can see the disparity. It's even worse in Nigeria. And then there's also a popular dogma that there's apparently no family that doesn't have someone with mental illness. You may not know, okay? But if we look down the history, the great, grand, you get. I mean, it may not even be so blown, but even sometimes we know that this person is not acting normal. We may not know what it is, okay? It may not be that serious. But we know that this person is small. Sure you get. So there's no family like that that won't have someone with mental illness. You may not know, okay? So what are the things that cause mental illness? What are the things that are responsible for development of mental illness? So it's a popular knowing that we cannot particularly say that this is the cause. Now, what do I mean? For malaria, for example, we can say that what causes malaria is a parasite known as Plasmodium, okay, carried by mosquito. We can pinpoint it. But unfortunately, for most mental illnesses, we cannot particularly say that this is the cause. Of course, we have assumptions, we have ideas, we have factors that we see, an interplay of factors that we see, but we cannot particularly say that this is the one. Okay, so that would mean that when people develop mental illnesses, is usually because there's an interaction, there's an interplay of several factors, and these factors are largely biopsychosocial. Now, bio means biological, meaning I will still explain this further, but biological things that happen to the body. Okay, so for example, maybe a family history of mental illness, that is, someone in the family has this kind of mental illness, an individual might be at risk of having the same. Okay, someone who smoke cannabis, igbo, weed, for example, that's a biological cause. Okay, now, but the main causes of mental illnesses, or the main factors that have been identified majorly, are psychosocial. So usually things that have to do with psychology and social issues. Social issues like crime, being single, having no children, things like that can happen to anybody. So these are some of the psychosocial factors. Economic hardship, which is a fact in the world today, and even in Nigeria. I mean, the economic recession that happened post-COVID-19, the world is yet to recover from it. And even worse in Nigeria, because now in Nigeria, there are things like subsidy removal. Okay, we all know how much we buy fuel now. That's even if you see anyway. We know how much we buy fuel. There's disparity in dollar naira rates. Okay, so there's inflation. You can buy something for 2 naira today, go there tomorrow, they will tell you 15 naira. Those things alone are enough to weigh the mind down, are enough to make us worry. Okay, and the fact that for people to now cope, they indulge in things like robbery, they indulge in things like banditry, and then the victim are also they are bothered. The victims don't find it easy, so they are predisposed to having mental illnesses. Terrorism, like I've mentioned earlier, kidnapping, job losses. Yeah, even at the start of when work resumed after COVID-19, a lot of people were retrenched, a lot of people were sent back home, a lot of people lost their jobs because of COVID-19. So it's a lot. If you lose loss of loved ones, loss of children, spouse, people close to your relatives, these are things that can predispose the mind to mental illnesses, sexual abuses, rape. Then as a parent, if you find it difficult to meet up with the responsibilities of taking care of your children, it can be very, very challenging when you can't even put food on the table as a father, or your kids sent out of school almost every time. These are things that bother people. And then family disruptions, separations here and there, divorce here and there. And then, of course, because Nigerians are trying to escape the economic hardship now, there's the Japa syndrome. Everybody wants to Japa. Okay? And unfortunately, some fall victim of all these immigration shams. They scam people, and then you have to be deported back home. So imagine that you have told everybody that, oh, I'm going to Canada, and then the following week, you are back. They have deported you. You know that one is a problem. So these are things that can. These are factors that can interplay to make an individual develop mental illness. And then now, the things I've been talking about so far have been negative things. But let me shock you that even positive things are enough to tilt somebody into mental illness. For instance, getting married. You can become so happy, so joyful that it triggers a mental illness. Having a new baby, getting promoted, can trigger a mental illness. Okay, I've once heard of someone who won a lottery in the US also. I think some millions, and then he ran mad because it was like, worry, he ran mad. So if money comes to you, boy, you did plan for it stuff. Okay, so I'm just trying to say that positive things too. Okay, can tilt individuals into developing mental illnesses. So the biological ones I was talking about the other time, family history, when there's someone in the family with mental illness, people who use hard drugs, people who undergo chronic medical conditions, okay? And then people who have lost their senses of of doing things. They can't see again. You can see before you can't see again. You can hear before you can't hear again. They have to depend on people to take care of you. These are things that bothers the mind. I can take somebody into mental illness. Okay, so more on biological. So this is just a picture showing the brain. Now, in the brain, there are things that we call neurotransmitters. Okay, now these neurotransmitters are things that when they work together, they allow us to think normally. They allow us to behave normally. Okay, they allow us to talk normally. Okay, the fact that I'm holding the microphone like this is because my neurotransmitters are working very well. Okay, if they were not working very well, I could probably there's problem. Okay, there's problem. Now, when these factors work together, the way they work is they then affect these chemicals such that the ones that are supposed now there's a level that each of these chemicals must that we must have them in our brains. Okay, so when challenges happen and they are not properly managed, these chemicals are affected such that some become too much, some become too low, and when these happen, then there are changes in our behaviors, in the way we talk and the way we think, and then that's what people will see, and they will know that voila today. Okay, but really what really happens is that brain chemicals have been altered in the brain. Now this will be important because one of the interventions for mental illness, which include the use of medications, drugs, is the fact that these drugs then alter these brain chemicals to become normal too. As challenges can make them abnormal, there are drugs that can then make them normal. Okay, so then now let's then talk about what are even some of these common mental illnesses that we have. Okay, so when these factors overwhelm the mind, okay, and then we fail, coping mechanisms fails to contain them, meaning that we can't cope with them, we get frustrated. So these things can happen. So one of them is what we call depression, and this is beyond mere sadness. When things happen to everybody, things that should make one sad, of course it is expected that we become sad. But when this sadness becomes prolonged, when it's associated with other things, then we can say that okay, this is depression. So it's not just. So I'm saying this because when people go through challenges now, for example, they serve somebody breakfast, and then she's saying that I'm depressed. No, you are not depressed. You are just sad. Okay, or you are just sad. You are just sad. So depression sets in when, after a period of time, the sadness lingers. So you're unduly sad, and it's for a pretty long time. You also have no energy. You don't feel like doing anything. The things that you usually do that gives you joy, an individual loses interest in doing them, and then they have these guilt feelings. They begin to blame themselves that I have done this and that, this and that. Now, let me bring this home. For those of us who watch Nollywood very well, especially the Yoruba movies, and then there's usually scenes where they show older women, elderly women, and they will be kind. You understand? They will be saying that minimupa lagwaja kiniko to shekiniko minimufa. No, most times, sometimes they are not possessed, they are not witches. So sometimes they are depressed, and then they have guilt feelings, and then every bad thing that has happened before, they then take responsibility and say that they caused it. Okay, so most times they are not actually depressed. It's just the community that then say, Jenny Yaya. No. She may not be Ajay. Okay, she might just be depressed. I'm saying this because these are things that happen commonly, so that when we see them, we can take proactive step and not just label them like every other person would, and have that suspicion and think that okay, this might actually be depression, and then let's see what we can do about this. Okay, then for some they don't sleep well, for some they lose appetite, for some they are unable to concentrate on things, for some they feel low, they have low self-esteem, for some they even feel tired. They get fed up of the world and just want to die, they want to kill themselves. Okay, another common one is anxiety disorders. Okay, where undue fear dominates the mind. Now, of course, we all need a little bit of fear to even function very well. Okay, but when it gets too much, Now, what I'm trying to say is, if maybe I'm getting better now anyway, but before, if I'm told that I'm going to address people and talk, my heart will do bish, 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 and I'm sure it's common to most people. But it's when you then do it more and more that you get better at it. So those are things like, it can be as subtle as that, getting scared when you're asked to do things. But beyond that, even being bothered about the issues of life, okay, everyday issues of life, what every other person worries about, kilamaje, kilamam. But for you, when it gets excessive, for individuals, when it gets excessive, then we can say that, and there might be an anxiety problem. And then in association with that, people then, their heart beats fast. They get, not that their heart beats fast really, but they get more aware of their heart beating. So it appears as if it's beating fast. They sweat more. They have this chest tightness, as if they can't breathe. Okay, and then when he gets extreme, they develop what we call panic attacks, where they feel like they're going to die there, right there and then. Okay. Now, another one is what we call mania. Okay, and this is just on the other pole, on the other side of depression. Depression is when an individual is very sad, okay, for a long time, usually 2 weeks. Okay, mania on the other hand is when an individual is very happy, okay, or very irritable, meaning that things that usually don't get them angry, all of a sudden they begin to get annoyed by those things. Okay, so those are the things that we can see that will point to an individual developing mania. I mentioned earlier that even positive things can tilt somebody into mental illness. One of this is this mania. When positive things happen to people, then they go manic. They become extremely happy. Okay, and then they have elevated self-importance. They begin to become very nice. For example, if you ask him for 500 naira before, you say that I don't have anything. Then all of a sudden, they just start dashing you 1,000. They can give you 10,000 self back, and then they will do that for a very long time. Okay, then they are hyperactive. They talk excessively. Okay, so these are some of the things we see. Another one is personality disorders, where people, now personality essentially just talks about who an individual is. So who are you? So if they ask someone to describe you, how will they describe you? That's what personality talks about. So when individuals have challenges with some things, there could be changes in their personality, where someone who was probably gentle before then becomes very garrulous, very friendly, without reason. Okay, and then so these are the things that we can see that can point to personality changes. People become dependent on others. People then begin to seek for attention unnecessarily. Okay. Then another is schizophrenia. Don't mind don't mind the medical jargons. Now, schizophrenia is what mostly happens in people we see on the street. That majorly, not all of them, but most of them. This is what they have, and this is because they hear voices they don't see. Others don't see. Others don't hear. So we can be here like this, and then someone might be hearing another person talk to them, and that person is not in the vicinity. Okay, and because those things that talk to them can be telling them nice things about themselves, can even be commanding them that, oh yeah, today, jade, bosolititi, bosho. Okay, so that's why we tend to see more of these individuals on the street. Okay, so but the way you can know is these people, they will then begin to talk to themselves, begin to laugh to themselves, because they tend to want to reply the voices they are hearing, but you cannot hear. So there can be two people in the room now. One person is hearing a voice, the other is not. So the one hearing will be replying that voice, and then in so doing, will be talking to self, because there's really nobody there. Okay. The other things is they begin to hold on to some beliefs that they cannot prove. So things accusing their relatives that they want to harm them, they want to kill them, or saying that they are talking about them on television. For example, you can just be listening to news, JJ, and then an individual with schizophrenia would then believe that that's my matter. They are talking about me. They are talking about me. That's me on television. Okay, so things like that happen. And then these people will then begin to decline in their function in church, in their work, in school. All right. So the other one is cognitive disorder. This is common in old age and is when memory begins to fail. Of course, as we all get old, our memory fails. Okay, slightly. But when it becomes excessive and unduly, then there will be need for a mental for intervention. Okay, so when people forget things, they might not remember where they put things, and then instead of owning up to the fact that they don't remember, they then accuse people around that, you have stolen my Bible, you have stolen my money, where did you put my money? But in reality, they cannot remember. Now I'm saying this because I know that we all have parents or grandparents living with us, and then some would begin to forget things, and when they forget things, they will then begin to blame you as the caregiver that you have stolen my money. It can be very distressing, actually. It can be very, very, very distressing. But you should understand that this is what is going on. It is not their fault per se. They are not trying to be stubborn. They are just going through a difficult time. They are just having cognitive issues. Okay? So let's talk briefly about the mental health of children and adolescents. Okay? So who is a child? Okay? A child is anybody below the age of 18 years. 18 years. 18 years. Okay? And then a young person is then someone between 10 and 24 years. In Nigeria, about half of the population of Nigerians are children. So we have about 100 million Nigerians. So 100 million children in Nigeria. Okay? Now, this is important because this stage is very critical for development, for human development, the adolescent period. So this means that it is not a period that we must joke with. It is not a period that we take with levity, because if we mismanage this period, the chances are high that indelible consequences can be left on these children. So we need to manage this period very well, as parents, as brothers, as church members, as the community at large. And the fact remains that in the past 20, 30 years, the mental health concerns for children has been on the rise. Okay? About 1 in 5 children might have one mental challenge or the other. Okay? And then the half of the now, so is a saying that in adulthood, if 100 people have mental health illness, half of them have had them since they were at least 14. So they've had them since, meaning that if we're able to manage when they develop it, the chances that we reduce them in adulthood will be high. So that's why this period is very critical. And unfortunately, about 80% of these children don't receive care. Okay? So girls tends more to be depressed, and boys tend more to be risky. So things like experimenting new things, spoiling things, those are things boys do more. But girls, we tend more to be reserved, quiet, depressed. Okay, and also in this period, in this age group rather, suicide is the third most common cause of death, and so we need to manage this period very well. So for children, there are things that are considered, factors that predispose and factors that protect. So now, by saying predispose, it means that factors that will precede a negative outcome and will increase the chance of something happening. So something that can cause something to happen. Okay, and protective is something that can avoid that thing from happening. So children are exposed to both of these things, and then we need to then strive to make sure that the predisposing, the bad one, is lessened, and the protective one is increased. So what are these factors? Okay, so these factors, I'm not sure we can see very well, but I'm going to try and read them out. Okay, for the risk factors. So these factors focus on the child, himself, the family, the school, life events that happen, and then social environment. So for the child themselves, a child on her own, his or her own, can have difficult temperament. Okay, can have low self-esteem, can have negative thinking style. Okay, now what we don't do is to ensure that on the other side, this child then gets things that we expose him or her to good temperament, okay, good social emotional skills, and then optimistic coping style. Okay, Then for the family, unfortunately, sometimes disharmony happens in the family. Family falls apart. There's instability. There's breakup. Um, there's inconsistent discipline style. We've seen stories of fathers using plank to beat their children. Those things are things that predispose to mental illness. Okay, and then parents themselves who have one mental illness or the other, or abuse substances, they their children tend more to come down with mental health challenges. So on the other side, it would mean that families who are cohesive, family who are supportive, family who are strong together, families who encourage supportive parenting, who listen to their children. Of course, you discipline your child, but you still listen to them. So families that do that, families that show strong family values, their children tend more to be okay mentally. Okay, and in school, children who face peer rejection, peer pressure, school failure, they tend more to have one mental illness or the other. Whereas a school where the teacher encourages all, shows connectedness among the kids. Of course, we can't do without these things in school, bullying and all that. But for those of us that are teacher years, yeah, we should take up the responsibility of limiting bullying. I mean, of ensuring that you have a cohesive class, you have everybody supporting one another. Then in life events, when someone in the family dies, when the emotional traumas in the family, they're predisposed to mental illness and things that will be good when there's involvement with caring for a caring adult and then support available at critical times. So the take home from this slide is that we all should strive to have more factors that will protect our children from coming down with mental health challenges. So what are the types of mental illness that can happen in children? So mood issues, mood issues, psychotic problems, anxiety-related disorders, elimination disorders, and all this. I'm going to explain them in details. So for the mood disorders, things there are similar to what we have in adulthood, but they just present in certain ways. So in preschool children, meaning those that are not yet in school, okay, about 0.3% of them might be depressed. And then this gets higher as they grow. Okay, so as children enter adolescence, they tend more to have more mental health problems, more mood, depression, for example. And then how will you know that your child is depressed? It depends on their age. Okay, so for the younger ones, they can tell you things like I have a headache, or they start refusing your food, and this happens for a long time. Okay, they start having sleep issues, and this happens for a long time. For older children, they begin to have issues with school performance. Someone you know has been in the range of first to third before, and then suddenly, in a class of 50, they then go down to 40. And then you must suspect that there's a problem. Or they get more withdrawn. They don't play like they used to. They get more withdrawn. So you should then guess or have an idea that something's wrong with my child. Might be depressed at this point. Okay? And then adolescents, because they are more mature, they can actually express feelings of sadness. They can tell you that, and you can see very well that I'm sad. I feel inadequate. I feel I'm useless. So they say things like that to you. And then in this age group, unfortunately, if not properly managed, some might go ahead to kill themselves, to commit suicide, because they are just overwhelmed with the issues they are battling with. Okay, so another group, the development behavioral issues. So these things are where we have things like autism. I'm sure you've heard of this. Autism, ADHD. ADHD is attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, oppositional defiant disorder, conduct disorder. I'm going to explain. So in autism, it's when you see a child that at the age when that child is supposed to be talking. In fact, even when you were raising the child, when the child was growing up, you would be observing some things that, normally mothers are here. At a certain age, when you smile to a child smiles back. Yeah? But for some children, For some, unfortunately, some don't smile back. At that point, you should be suspecting that, okay, there might be a problem. Okay, and then when they now get older, they don't they don't talk when they are supposed to talk. Okay, they don't interact well with others. They don't communicate well with others as they should. And for some of them, they play in a very strange way. Okay, they can just pick a toy, for example, and then they'll just be attached to one part of that toy. That's the only thing that matters to them. You can buy them a toy car, for example, and the only thing they will be playing with there is the tire. So that those are some hot plays. Those are things we should look out for in our children. Okay, and then for some that have ADHD, they become very hyperactive. Now, for especially for boys, boys are probably the stubborn ones. Okay, me myself, they tell me my stories, of how I was not gentle. Okay, how stubborn I was. Thank you, Jerry. But we thank the Lord for the Lord. Okay, yeah. So it's not uncommon that boys will be very stubborn, but when it gets excessive, now as stubborn as I was, on be me that king shake patati ma one sure you get, because that is there. But children who have ADHD at home, in church, in school, they don't send you. You see, I don't think I have any ADHD in this church. Praise the Lord. Because if we had, they would have come here, probably collected my microphone, talk with my laptop and things like that. So those are things we see in people who have ADHD. And I'm walking ballet. And then this happen in many settings, at home, in school, in church. Okay, the teachers complain, the parents complain, and even in church, in Sunday school, they complain about this kind of children. And then the other ones are the oppositional defiant disorder and the conduct disorder. It's similar, and it's when people they violate rules. Okay, so they do this. Of course, children naturally are defiant. They will do what you told them not to do normally. But when this gets excessive, when it gets too much, they don't fear anybody. They intentionally then spite others. Intentionally just to spite that person, and it does that consistently. Okay, and then sometimes they destroy properties. When they get older, they destroy properties. They set things on fire. Those are kids who have conduct issues. They don't have the ability to conduct themselves. It's just English word, okay? Yeah, so for elimination disorders, these are things that have to do with encopresis and enuresis. Now, what does this mean? At some certain age, it's expected that children don't bedwet again. It's expected that children don't poo on themselves again, okay? But for some, they are unable to. For some, they still pee on themselves at some. Now, normally, at 4 years, children should no longer poo on themselves, and at 5, they should not pee on themselves. But for some, beyond these ages, they still poo on themselves, they still pee on themselves. Yeah, this is important because I know that we experience this with children, and then if we don't properly manage them, we might take them into even more serious mental illnesses. When we say things like, when we abuse them or beat them all the time, it doesn't help. There are ways that we can manage this. There are ways that wouldn't involve you beating them. Beating them will only make it worse, okay? So there are ways we can manage them. And now I'm bringing this up because now in the advent of westernization, where we are adopting Western values, everybody now wants to be peperempe. Everybody wants to be thin. Everybody wants to be fat again. So people go to the extreme, and then they don't eat well. And even when they eat, they then induce vomiting. They vomit everything they eat. And of course, they don't grow properly. They lose weight. They don't grow properly. So we should look out for this too. This is becoming a thing now that we are adopting Western values. So now, substance use disorder. Unfortunately, this is a menace that has plunged our society. You almost every day, next slide, almost every day online, you see people abusing one form of substance or the other, okay? They smoke cannabis, they smoke shisha, smoke cigarettes, take alcohol like water. Is a big one, and it's been estimated that more than one in four of individuals between age 15 and 19 drink alcohol. Okay, and then the majority of people taking cigarettes today, they started when they were adolescents. Okay, and now things like cannabis, like ice, people now take them to get high. Unfortunately, it affects them, and then they develop mental illnesses. Okay, so these are other types of mental illnesses that's similar to what we have in adults, can also happen in children. So what do we do? What can we do as Christians? How do we respond to these things? What is our role? What are our responsibilities to manage the scourge of mental illness that we have in our world? Okay, so there are two main approaches: preventive and interventional. So preventive is okay. Let's even prevent it from happening in the first place. Okay. Interventional is when it now happens, how do we manage it? How do we treat it? Okay. And both approaches follow the biopsychosocial spiritual model. This means that biologically, let the health workers be sent to do something. Psychologically and socially, let the family members be sent to do something. The society, the psychologists, the social workers. Okay. And then spiritually, let the church be seen doing something. Let our pastors be seen doing something. Let the unit heads be seen doing something. Let families, let brethren be seen doing something about addressing the scourge of mental illness. So, in prevention, the Bible is the book of wisdom, okay? And in fact, the Bible opened up with a supernatural reality. I mean, Genesis 1:3 says, and God said, let there be light. Yeah? And there was light. Meaning that God's will is that in every darkness of our lives, there should be light. So we should have that understanding. We should know that it is God's will that there should be light in this darkness of mental illness. Okay? And that now in the scriptures and the epistles, there lies remedies to all these factors that can cause mental illness, all these factors we have spoken about earlier. Now, in the Garden of Eden, when Adam and Eve disobeyed God, death came in. And that's the origin of death and sicknesses. And, the Bible says, for all have sinned and come short of the glory of God. And because of this disobedience by man, there came it affects the relationship between God and man. Okay? But thanks be to God, because the remedy came. Okay? God sent his son to save us. Okay? For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son, that whosoever believes should not perish, okay, but have everlasting life. And that the law of the Spirit of life in Christ Jesus has made us free from the law of sin and death. Now this means that even though man brought death and sickness into the world by disobedience unto God, God in his mercies has also reached out to have a restored fellowship with him. So in this fellowship, okay, out of this love that God has shown unto us again, out of this fellowship with God, is where we then strive to protect our mental illness, our mental health rather, is when we then make moves to protect our mental health. Now, God's plan for all men is that we have good health, is that we enjoy good health. And this is evident in 3 John verse 2, that beloved, I wish above all things that thou mayest prospereth and be in health, even as thy soul prospereth. So this means that, John has, like I mentioned earlier, that the WHO defines mental health as realizing one's potential. Okay. Now, John has even gone ahead of medical scientists to write his letter that, okay, it is God's will that you are in health, and not just physical health, that even your soul, your mind prospers. So God is in the business of ensuring that our mental space is preserved. Okay. Now, that being said, no one is now free from issues of life. We are in the world, but we are not of the world. But because we are in the world, we cannot but be exposed to things that can affect our mind, to things that can affect our mental health. No one is free from this. And that's why Jesus even said in John 14:33 that these things are spoken unto you, that in me ye might have peace. Okay? Now in this world though, you will have what? You have tribulations. Okay? But be of good cheer. I have overcome the world. So despite the fact that tribulations abound in the world, there's nothing we can do about it. God, Jesus has assured us of victory. Okay? So we are assured of promised victory over the challenges that might inflict our minds, that can cause mental stress. Okay? And we are troubled on every side, yes, but we are not distressed. We are perplexed, but we are not in despair. We are persecuted, but we are not forsaken. We are cast down, but we are not destroyed. This is the will of God for us. So it is from this understanding that the things we now do stem out. Okay? Now, in managing these challenges, there are two factors that should be considered: the mind and the external environment. Now, although we might not be totally able to control what happens in the external environment, okay? Now, external environment means that it is beyond you. So I cannot control whether or not Dr. Ajala, for example, will hurt me. I cannot control whether or not Dr. Akinyemi will do something bad to me. But I can control my mind in handling these things when they happen. Okay? So, and that's why in Proverbs 4:23, stated that keep thy heart with all diligence, because out of it comes what? The issues of life. So believers should strive to guard their mind. Yeah? We should not be conformed to this world. We should renew our mind daily. We should remove our mind daily so that we can prove what is good and acceptable unto God. Okay? And yeah, this growth happens over time. It happens by coming to church regularly, by listening to sermons regularly, by reading our Bibles regularly, by praying regularly. It is a gradual process. Growth takes time. Okay? So we should be committed to our spiritual life. We should be committed to growing. We should be seen to be committed to grow, because in the long run, this also helps our mental health. This also keeps our mental health in check. Okay? Now, these are some of the tips that we can do, some of the things we can do to make sure our mental health is intact. So we can employ good coping skills. We can exercise regularly. Exercise does not necessarily mean that you have to go and register at the gym and carry weight. No. In your compound, you can do brisk walking. Brisk walking, like walking very briskly. Come on. Okay? You can do that every day for like 30 minutes just to keep fit. Okay? Meditate. Do yoga. You can take breaks if need be. And because, and then avoid bad coping methods. People sometimes take coffee, abuse hard drugs, take alcohol, smoke just to cope with issues of life. These are things that make it worse. So don't do that. Okay? Now, every day, once you try and set a goal on what to achieve. Okay? Like, be specific about. Sorry, sir. I'm checking my time. I'll soon round up, sir. So check the time. Be specific on what you want to do. Make a plan. How are you going to meet up with it? Write it down. Okay? There's this saying that the faintest stick is sharper than the brightest mind. Yeah. So write things down. This is what I want to do today. Okay? Then have people around you, support system. Okay? People you can always run to when things happen. Reward yourself sometimes. Don't do pardonment to yourself. Sometimes take yourself out. Enjoy yourself. It's good for mental health. Okay? Then employ what we call breathing exercises. Don't worry, I know that there's no money, but even in that no money, take money out to go and enjoy yourself. Okay? And when you get up in the morning, have a devotion with God. Commit the day into God's hands. Okay? So this is a video about, next slide please. This is a video about how we can do when we feel stressed, when we feel anxious. These are things we can do to just breathe and relieve some stress. So please kindly play the video. So you just take some deep breath, just like you're showing for some seconds, and then you maintain it, and then you release. So if you do that, it relieves some stress. It's like you're releasing tension. So that really works. So next slide please. So also intentionally try and avoid some things on social media. So things that are scary, all these video of people cutting. You know how many people are blocked on my WhatsApp because of those things. Protect your mental health. It's not everything that you must see. If you must include or involve that you don't visit some social media platforms, so be it. Okay, some videos are not meant for you. And our African mothers, it's not everything that you share. Yeah, you share everything on WhatsApp. If you share everything, no, it's as if they have a common group. No, it's not. Something's just insightful unnecessarily. Okay, then of course the family is the unit of every community, and every family should strive to protect the mental health of themselves. Okay, so wives submit to your husband, husband loves your wives, children obey your parents. Okay, fathers don't provoke your children. I'm sorry, I'm trying to rush. Then when mental illnesses now happen, how do we intervene? Unfortunately, in developing worlds like Nigeria, before people get to the hospital, they are first taken to spiritual healers, babalawos on the mountain, and things like that. And then before they even get them referred, they are dehydrated. Some even die when they come. Okay, so this should not be our first approach. So these are just pictures of places where people tie people down to. Okay, next slide, please. Where people are being tied down just to treat. Okay, now in the church setting, okay, usually when things happen, we usually consult our pastors and leaders first, which is fine. Okay, in fact, when the God of Word is being preached on the pulpit, sometimes some anxiety gets laid out, some depression gets healed. Okay, in fact, in the Bible, we saw Jesus heal the madman of Gadarene, Abi. So we know that spiritually these things happen. Okay, the Word of God can also provide victory for addictions, for dysfunctional family. But beyond that, beyond that, there should be timely referral to professionals. Okay, like I always say, doctors, nurses, they are not anti-faith. Okay, whichever drug that has been found out to work today is because God has given men brain and sense to come up with those things. Yeah, it is not natural. It is God's doing. Okay, and then when members get sick, members should visit them, show support, don't discriminate. Okay, encourage them to take their medications. Yeah, I must particularly at this point say kudos to some pastors that actually follow patients to clinic here in Lautech. Encourage them to take their drugs. They won't take their matters more seriously than themselves or even family members. So pastors need to do this more. Do this. This really helps. And then for children, parents should train up their child. Okay. So the overview from here is that as parents, we should limit what our children watch. In fact, probably even limit their access to smartphones. There are many uncensored materials out there that can sway children in the wrong direction. So children should do this. You should train your children in the way of the Lord. So in conclusion, we've been able to see that in the world there are a lot of factors that pose threat to our mental health. Okay, and then the task of achieving a mentally healthy church is not up to our pastors alone. It's a collaborative effort that involves all the youths, all the parents, all the unit heads, all the members. Okay, and we must ensure that we are brothers keepers at every time. That is the essence of Christianity. That's the essence of Christianity. Christians in the Bible, in Acts of Apostles, they looked out for each other. They sold properties just to cater for the needs of others. Okay, so that is God's way. That is how we should act. And our solo fellowship with God is the shield for our mental well-being. And then when individuals then come down with mental illness, please don't discriminate. Okay, and lastly, we should know that really there is no health without mental health. Health is an encompassing package, physically, emotionally, socially, economically, financially, spiritually. It is encompassing. So we should treat mental health with all seriousness. Amen. We should not treat it with levity. So these are my references. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Doctor. We are very grateful for these insightful teachings. When he was talking, I have a lot of questions bothering my mind. But I will require if any of us have any question to ask Doctor. Yes. I don't know you're going to be a question. Okay, we have one. Okay, let me give you number. Let me start from the one. You want to ask question? Okay, Baba. This Baba will be number one. You are number two. Brado, you're number three. I cancel you. Number 4, number 5, 6, 7. 7. Okay, number 1. Please, second mic. Oh, yeah.
Thank you very much, Doctor, for the enlightenment you are giving us. I observe our youth these days. They are so much attached to their phones. Anytime, even when they are traveling, the only thing that can maybe separate them with their phones is maybe when they are sleeping. Can we say this is a mental challenge?
Okay, sir. Thank you very much. When phone first came, there is this SMS. What is the meaning of SMS? GSM. That is the number one. General street madness. You want to answer one after the other? Because if you are answering another one, may let's take the whole question together. Okay, that's number 2. Okay.
Praise God.
Hallelujah.
So my question is, I can't remember the medical terms you used, but if it has gotten to this stage where the person hears voices, what can be done?
You get the question. Okay, thank you. Number 3.
Thank you, sir. My own question is on enuresis, right? Enuresis.
Okay.
What is the solution?
Okay, number 4. Number 4.
Thank you for the lecture. I just want to ask. I am a teacher, and sometimes we come across different children. For instance, I came across a child from the lower classes. So ever since they have admitted the child, he doesn't mingle with others. And their sittings is this round table with their chairs individually. So he will carry his chairs and go and sit at the corner of the class and be looking. So if the teachers, if they at least play with him and take him back to his colleagues, he will take the chair again and go back to where he is. So he doesn't mingle with others. I don't know if that one is temperament or something. I don't understand. So how can one help that kind of a child? And then we have children, like I've said, some are facing challenges from home. So at times you'll be teaching and some will be shedding tears. They'll be crying. So they are not concentrating. So those children, how do you do with them? How do you handle them?
Okay. Number 5.
Thank you very much, sir. I want to come from the angle of environmental side. As you have rightly said, so many of us has different upbringing. And sometimes this has caused us issues in marriage. I want to relate the environmental factor and marriage together. I'm being wired differently, and I had another upbringing different from my wife. And now, you've said some preventive measures. I think there are some that are not preventable. We can pray to God to give us our heart desire to marry. And at the end of the day, He give us someone to marry. That's prevention. You prevent to marry wrong person. But there is an upbringing you can't change. And in yourself, you can't change some of your upbringing. In my family, that is the head. Sometimes women can feel domineering, extrovert and extrovert. Sometimes somebody can be a conceiving person. Now, what I want to ask, what are the preventive measures in marriage that can cause mental issues? The unpreventable measures that have come up, ìyàwó fẹ́ ṣe bí ọba, ọkọ náà fẹ́ control. What are some other preventive measures? Because so many marriages nowadays, because of their upbringing, the upbringing of the children has collapsed just because of little things. So what are the other preventive measures we can take?
Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. I just have 3 questions.
Nikazuzo?
Just briefly.
Okay.
1, I want to ask, there's somebody in my hand now that he was disappointed maritally, and he seek for admission. He was called disappointed, though it's working. So, and I asked him, how about life? He said he's just living. Just go to work, come back. He's not coping with, he's not feeling exact with anything again because of those things. It's like, the way he even responded to me so that he had this one in his mind. In that case, what's your advice to a person like that? That's number 1. Number 2 is that on the issue of the children, if a child, anytime the mother cook good food that she likes, always she will start singing and be talking. You understand what I'm saying now? And it's becoming a consistent thing. I hope it's not a mental issue. That's why. Then lastly, when it's a child who ceases to wee on the bed, tí o ní jẹ́ pé ó ti di abnormal, ọmọ ń tọ̀ lé, ìgbà ló lé kíni ló lè stop, tí o jẹ́ pé tó ó ti di kíni ó ti di abnormal.
Thank you, Doctor, for this talk. I have 2 questions. My first question, you talked about there are some positive things that can lead to mental illness, like being happy, like the example you gave also. So my question is that, is there a way we can curb our happiness that it will not lead to our mental illness? That's the first question. Then the second question I want to ask, you talked about some type of mental disorder in which people find themselves destroying things. And I've had cases of people who say whenever they are angry, they destroy things. So is there any correlation between being angry and mental illness? And if there is correlation, is there a way we can undo that situation in which we can let the person know that what is happening to you is not your character, that you are angry, that's why you are destroying things. It's your mental illness. So you need to check your mental something, so that your mental state, so that it won't lead to something else. So those are my questions.
Thank you very much. Now my questions. Now, if I'm feeling sick, I will go to the doctor, to the hospital, that I'm sick. If I have problem with my eyes, I know that I will go to the ophthalmologist. If I have problem with my teeth, the dentists are there. Now, if perhaps I don't know what is really happening to me, is it possible for me just to come to psychiatric hospital for evaluation? Is there something like that? And 2, I'm concerned, especially with your profession. We have people walking around the streets. I don't know what your people are doing about it. Is it not possible for you to help us gather them and treat them? Eh? And when you walk around the road, you know that there are some regular faces. But occasionally you see new faces around. What is at least the psychiatric people should be able to have and gather all of them together, treat them and release them back into the society. Abby, thank you.
Once again, thank you very much for this privilege, and thank you for the questions. Okay, so let's attempt to answer them. So for the first question about especially youth being fixated on use of phones, that is this a mental health challenge? Okay, now in psychiatry now there's such a thing known as internet use disorder. Okay, there's also something called gaming disorder. Okay, so when youth gets more fixated on use of internet, use of phones, and then use of phones to play games excessively, okay, there's a criteria for it that qualifies as a mental illness. Now, it doesn't mean that all youths who use phones, all youths who use the internet, all youths who play games have mental health challenges. But youths that then fulfill the criteria for the disorder, we can say that indeed there's a problem. Okay. Now, in life generally, there's basically nothing that doesn't have advantage and disadvantages. It is in the overuse that we abuse things. Okay, but the use properly is really not bad. Phones have their positive sides, access to information, things we need to do. Sometimes watching some comedies can even uplift your mood sometimes. Okay, but then when the use gets excessive, when it meets the criteria, now there are some criteria listed that when an individual does some or all of them, you can say that there's problem with internet use, there's problem with gaming. So for instance, someone whose mind is always preoccupied with pressing phone, always preoccupied with playing game, okay, wakes up in the morning, instead of devotion, it is game, it is phone. At night, before you sleep, it is game. In the afternoon, it's like those, morning, afternoon, night. So there's a problem, okay? Or where you're even pressing phone on the road almost every time. No, it's a problem, okay? So for such people, there's need for something to be done. First, that individual needs to know that, okay, this is a problem. And then the people around would then try to manage it. Maybe collect, if they are willing, of course. If they know that there is a problem, they can be more receptive to help. So help, like sometimes they can even do away with their phones, just drop their phones. Now, the reason why this happens, or why this can be very difficult to cope, is because now there's something called the reward center in the brain. Reward center. So when we do things that we like, things that make us happy, the brain is wired in such a way that it wants us to do more of it. Okay? So if we are unable to control it, that's when it gets out of hand. So that means that individual will really need help. Okay? So as parents, sometimes we might need to seize our children's phone. Okay? Might need to talk to them with love, that come on, you are going the wrong path. Let us do something about it. So it's not always, you don't always have to be very, very strict. Sometimes speaking to your children with love really helps. So I hope I answered your question, sir. Thank you, sir. Then the second question about people hearing voices, that what can be done. Okay. Now, when people hear voices of people others don't hear, others don't say, okay, what happens is, like I mentioned earlier, there's disruption in the brain chemicals. Okay. Now, what will be done depends on what that person is hearing. Okay. Now, sometimes some people hear good things. So I can be walking or I can be alone in my room, and then I hear a strange voice telling me that, oh boy, I hear them at down. I probably will not even tell you that I'm hearing voice because those things are sweet things, okay? But that's by the way. On the other hand, people hear very nasty things, like go and kill yourself, strip yourself naked. So in that case, okay, that individual will benefit from a review by an expert. So it's not something you want to manage alone. It's not something you want to keep under the roof and say that let's observe prayer and fasting for 40 days and 40 nights. No, or do that, okay? But also let them see an expert if they have that kind of experience. Am I clear, ma? Okay, thank you. Now, the other question about enuresis, that was the solution. Now, I'm going to combine this question with a similar question about at what age do you expect a child to stop paying? Okay. Now, enuresis, like I mentioned, is when children pee beyond a certain age. So, every child at the age of 5 is expected not to bedwet again. Is expected not to bedwet again. But when they bedwet, first we need to analyze what the cause is, meaning what is causing this. Now, I'm saying this because we've seen cases of children when their parents give birth to another child, okay, and then their attention got reduced. Children when they had to leave where they were living before. So essentially, when things happen in a family, don't be shocked that it also affects children, but the way they express it differs. So when children sometimes pee like that, they might just be expressing some things that are going on in the family. So maybe the father even beats the mother sometimes. So those are things that affect the child, and in expressing it, they then over pee. They pee at night. Okay. So what can be done? Now, so there's a need for that child to see an expert, fine. But now, what would the expert do? There's a combination of, you can give drugs. There are drugs that can be given, but that's usually the last resort. What we'll first do are what we call behavioral therapy, behavioral management. Okay. Now, it's very simple. It's something that can be employed even before you see a doctor. Okay. So you can tell your child that, okay, tonight you are not taking plenty water, and then maybe after 6 p.m. you are not taking water again, and this is the amount of water you are taking this night. So that will reduce the amount of urine in the bladder. That will reduce the pee. Okay. Now, another thing that can be done is you can tell that child that, okay, this night, if you don't wet your bed, okay, I will buy you shawarma. Okay. So you cannot, maybe not this night. So if you don't wet your bed for 5 nights consecutively, I am going to give you shawarma. I'm going to buy you ice cream. I'm going to take you shopping. So it's about the mind. When the mind knows that there's a reward, okay, might get sense, okay. For the love for shawarma, we cause the child not to use that. Sure you get. So those are some of the things one can do. And then when this child have now even bedwet, how we manage it also matters. So it's not the time to begin to scold. You don't do that. That will not help. The guy will just continue to bedwet. He cannot help himself, but he or she will continue to do that. So you are far more like you manage them with love, okay? Then you do that. Now there's another thing that although it's not common in this environment, we call it the bell pad system, whereby a pad is attached to the bed where the child will sleep, usually around the bottom. Okay. Now it works in such a way that once urine or water drop on that thing, alarm will sound. Sure you get. So as pee is dropping on the pad like this, the alarm will just, the child will just wake up and go and pee. So that helps too. The other thing that helps is we can, as parents, we can wake up, we can have time intervals of waking children up. Okay? So maybe like by 12 a.m., 2 a.m., G, waloto, G, waloto, G, waloto. Over time, we must stop. Over time. So if it doesn't stop, of course, then see a doctor. Apart from these things that I've mentioned, there are other physical causes that can cause a child to bedwet, like diabetes insipidus, for example. So if you don't come to the hospital and it is because of that, we might not know. So that one, no matter how many behavior you do, it might work you because there's something central causing it. So have I answered your question, sir? Okay, thank you. So on the question about scenarios of children when a child staying alone, okay, and then kids who share tears in class. Okay. Now, the children are window into families. So what a child does in public usually is connoting what really happens at home. Okay, so a child that is crying like that, a child that is staying alone like that, aloof like that, there's probably, in fact, possibly something going on in the house. So now, what will a teacher do? First, you need to try and speak with the parent. Of course, the approach matters. You won't come from the approach of what's going on. You have to show care, love. Now, beyond that, some children are also like that because their parents actually abuse them at home. So as a teacher, you should be very sharp to look out for all those signs. In school, those are things that my point. So depending on what you see will determine the action that will be taken. So of course, you speak with the parent. This is what I see. What's going on in the family? Okay, and then in school, what you can do is, it's easy to pick on children like that in school. It's very easy for other children to then pick on them and bully them. So you prevent that actively. You stand in gap for that child. You become the school mommy. You are not touching this one. Okay? So because if children then pick on them, it gets worse. It gets worse. And of course, above all this, as Christians, as a Christian teacher, then of course, prayer works. So you pray again for the child. You pray again for the family. Because that's things they won't even disclose with you, that help just comes to them and then the child gets well. Shay, do you understand, ma? I hope I answer your question a bit. Okay. Okay, so issues about marriage and how it affects the children a bit. Okay. Now, when a man leaves his house to cling to another woman, of course, they have different upbringings. That is sacrosanct. There's nothing we can do about that. It is not my father that raised you, and it's not your father that raised me. It's not your mommy that, all those things. So there will always be differences. There will always be differences. Now, I know Daddy will still help us to answer better, but from my own little knowledge, I know that during courtship, these are things that both partners look out for. Now, there are some differences that you can manage. There are some differences that you can judge by yourself that you cannot manage. So if you think you cannot manage them, then in preventing problem in the future, you might do well by breaking it off before you enter it. It might be difficult, of course, but this we need those couples to carry their pastors along, have regular counseling sessions where these differences can be talked about. So if it's not a deal breaker, there are some differences that is not a deal breaker. You can deal with it. It can be managed. Now, there are two ways I approach something like this. Now, if there are differences that you can manage, two ways. It's either you decide within yourself that I can manage this difference, or whether or not my partner changes. Meaning that if this difference were to persist for years, I'm not going to complain. I'm going to carry my cross. Okay? And now the second approach is that you then hope that and work on each other that, okay, these differences, let's see how we can work on it. Let's see how we can get better in this regard. Do you understand me, sir? But Of course, it's not something that is done alone. We need to carry along our spiritual fathers to help with this matter. Now, because so in courtship, really, these matters should be things we look out for. When we look out for them, is very with the chances that it will not happen, they are higher than if we just allow emotions to overrule our decisions, and then it's the initial push. I'll marry this person. I'll marry this person. No, love is blind, but our senses, they are not blind. Our brain is not blind, so we should still think and consider those things. Am I able to answer your question a bit better? Okay, thank you. So the next question about someone who has had disappointment with life, maritally, academically, and then the person is just living for living's sake. Now, the person actually might be going through some depressive issues, okay, because of what the person has undergone. So, depending on how close to you are as a person, you can try to be there for them, show support, okay, and beyond that, you can even push them to seek professional help. Now, in psychiatry now, the doctor is not the only one that works. In fact, I believe that doctors even do the list. The bulk of the work lies with the social workers and the psychologists who talk with patients. They are skilled. Doctors who have these skills, who talk to patients, who have therapy sessions, who have talking sessions with individuals who undergo challenges. And this really helps. It works, I can tell you. It works. So such an individual can be encouraged to seek professional help about the matters they are undergoing. But the major factor is to show love to this person. Love conquers all. The approach of love conquers all. Okay? And then about a child who gets happy when the mother cooks, it might not be any issue really. It might not be any issue really. But you can just with love correct the child that don't act like this now. You can see children are very amenable. If you just tell the child that the next time you dance like this, I will tell mommy to reduce your food. Okay? The next time you say something like this because of food, I will tell mommy to give you something else. So gradually, we see some changes. Not all behavioral issues are mental health challenges. It's just diversified behavior. We don't behave the same way. We behave differently. Okay. So about the question on positive things even leading to mental illness. How do we curb happiness? Now, when happy things happen to us in life, okay, it's good that we have people around us to support, okay, and share the joy with. For example, now, if I win lottery now, okay, it's not easy, okay, but the best way really would be to have people around you, your pastors, your family members that for example, or a mother bet a child, okay, the joy can really get overwhelming. But when you have support around that can check it, that can keep it in check. In this world, no one is an island. We all need one person or the other to support us in challenging times and in good times. So we need people around to support us in those times, to keep us in check when we overdo. We are like, otito now. Sure you get something like that. So did I answer your question a bit? Then on the question about someone who, when he gets angry, it destroys things. So it might not really be a mental illness. The person he's just battling with anger issues. And what will be done for that person is to anger management classes. Okay, so you can encourage the person, like this is not how to behave when you are angry. Okay, maybe you should seek for help on how to manage your anger. Some people just don't know how to manage anger. So anger alone might not really be a problem. It is when it is associated with other things. Okay, so maybe if a person gets angry when they smoke now, we can know that there's a problem because it's the smoking that is causing the anger issues. But if it's just the person getting angry at what should get the person annoyed normally, but it's just excessive, it might not be a problem per se. So the person just needs help managing that anger. Okay? But of course, if it's not associated with other things, that one cannot be a mental health problem that also can be managed. Okay? So, am I okay? Thank you. Then, that is for your question, sir. For the first one about for physical health challenges, you know where to go. But what if something you just don't feel yourself, and then where do you go to? Now, so in most hospitals, okay, there's a place called General Outpatient Department where anybody can see doctors first. Now, these doctors are equipped with some knowledge about everything. So they have a bit of here and there about everything, such that if you tell them, they can then have some guess about which specialty to go to, or if it's something that you don't even need a specialty doctor for. So there's such a place for that, where general patients are seen, and then those people will now direct, okay, go to this place. Yes, sir. Then about people walking on the street, now what can we do? Well, the treating people with mental illness now is beyond just giving them medication. Because now, like I mentioned in the talk, that the things that predispose to mental illnesses are biological, psychological, and social. So if doctors cater for the biological aspect, who will cater for the psychological aspect? Who will cater for the social aspect? And those two, the psychosocial, are the most important aspect. Okay? So at best, we can give patient drugs, they will get well. Where will they go to? If they go back to the street, there's nobody buying their drugs again, they relapse again. So that would mean that there's need for the government, there's need for NGOs, for associations, even churches. There was once a pastor that saw someone on the street, okay, a girl, and then he brought her to us, and then he took responsibility for her care. He became a father figure for her. So those are things that should be done. Government having building homes, such that when doctors are done with their treatment, there's a place these people are going to. They are not just going back to the streets to fend for themselves. There's something waiting for them somewhere. So those are the ways. NGOs coming up, government, individuals coming up with things to do to help these individuals. So thank you very much once again for the questions.
Thank you very much.